I ask unanimous consent the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
So, Madam President, earlier today, leaders past and present from around the world joined together to celebrate the life of Madeleine Albright. While Secretary Albright may have been small in stature, she was a titan in American history. She was one of a kind, a first of a kind, a mentor, a natural leader, as well as a mother and grandmother. Her brilliance and sharp wit made her a formidable presence on the world stage, and her story inspired women and girls all across the globe. Today was a wonderful celebration of her life. My thoughts are with Secretary Albright's family as our nation remembers her life and her great legacy. Now, Madam President, on the FTC. As we've done all along this year, Democrats are continuing to focus on lowering prices for the American people. Yesterday, I met with Speaker Pelosi to discuss how both chambers can work together to address the terrible burden of rising gas prices. It's one of the most vexing issues for the American people. The disturbances from the pandemic and the war in Ukraine have caused gas prices to spike, and working Americans are hurting. But you know who are not hurting? The largest oil and gas companies, who reported over $205 billion in profits in 2021, even while Americans pay more at the pump. Solving this issue is a top priority for Democrats, a top priority. Unfortunately, the other side seems content with bemoaning rising costs day after day, without expressing any interest in actually offering solutions to the problem. Senate Democrats are actually working to solve the problem, and will continue talks with our House colleagues on legislation that can bring gas prices down. There are several options we can take. Now, there's a growing consensus that the federal government, especially the FTC, should investigate possible price gouging and price manipulation, market manipulation, that might be happening among the largest oil and gas companies in the country. This is one step we're working on out of many. Of course, any solution involving the FTC requires that the FTC have full membership to begin with. So we're also going to keep working to confirm Mr. Bedoya as the 5th FTC commissioner to break the 2-2 deadlock that's lasted for over a year. It's important to note Republicans unanimously are not voting for Mr. Bedoya, and that has paralyzed the FTC, even though its leadership would love to go after price gouging and market manipulation. We've had a few members absent because of health issues this week, but I want to be clear that health issues will not deter us from getting Mr. Bedoya and other important nominees like Lisa Cook confirmed. I urge any Republican who is truly worried about rising gas prices to drop their senseless objection to getting Mr. Bedoya confirmed. It seems it's only covering up for the oil companies and preventing a really sharp, piercing investigation of market manipulation and price gouging. There's something deeply wrong about seeing the largest oil companies while raking record profits while asking Americans to pay more at the pump. That's why we need an FTC with full membership, so it can look under the hood of Americans' energy sector and drill down into why big oil is pumping out record profits as consumers struggle. Again, I repeat to my Republican colleagues, if you care about lowering gas prices and care about looking at what the large companies, oligopolies, are doing, join us in voting Mr. Bedoya on the FTC. A vote against him is a vote for big oil and against the American driver and consumer. Now, on student debt. For over a year, one of my top priorities as Majority Leader has been urging President Biden to cancel $50,000 in student debt for each student loan borrower. Right now, as discussions continue within the administration about the future of student debt, I again call on the President to take action, which he can do on his own, and hit the financial reset button for millions and millions of Americans. President Biden's done the right thing by continuing the moratorium on student loan payments. His actions have saved millions from financial ruin during the COVID crisis. But borrowers don't just need their debts paused, they need them erased. These extensions have been crucial, but borrowers can't indefinitely plan out their financial futures 3 months at a time with the fear hanging over them that payments will resume down the line. With the flick of a pen, President Biden could provide millions upon millions of student loan borrowers a new lease on life. And he can do it without congressional action, because we know so many of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle are opposed to it. He can do it without congressional action. It's the right thing to do for our country. For generations, higher education has been a ladder up for getting into the middle class, especially for Black, Latino, Asian Americans. Unfortunately, student debt has become not a ladder up, but an anchor down, weighing Americans down. It makes it harder for borrowers to start a family, to buy a home or a car, live with financial independence. And for borrowers of color, the anxieties are magnified, often tenfold. Take this, for example. The white median borrower will only owe an average of 6% of their student loans 20 years after starting college. Meanwhile, the median Black borrower will still owe a staggering 95% of their student loan debt in that same time span. Imagine being closer to retirement than to college and realizing you've only made a dent in your student loans. Millions of borrowers of color, millions more of borrowers in general, live with this reality. Once again, borrowers don't need their debts paused, they need them erased. This isn't just the right thing to do for our economy, it's the right thing to do for racial equity, and I'll keep urging the President to take this important step. And I say to my colleagues, I think the President's moving in our direction. My talks with him and his staff have been very fruitful over the last little while, and I am hopeful that he will do the right thing. We're getting closer. We're getting closer. On Ukraine and COVID funding, in the immediate future, there are two different issues that demand swift and bipartisan action from the U.S. Senate: passing another Ukraine supplemental package and approving another round of COVID funding. In the coming days, the President's expected to send to Congress his request for action on Ukraine. We're going to make passing Ukraine funding a priority in the Senate, and I expect both sides to work together. As we've seen over the last 2 months, American support has gone a long way helping the Ukrainian people resist and even push back against Putin's savage and immoral war. But the fight's far from over. The Ukrainian people are fighting for survival in a contest that's much about democracy versus tyranny. There should be no question whatsoever about which side America stands on. We have a moral obligation to give the Ukrainian people the tools they need for as long as they need them. For this reason, I expect both sides to work in the same bipartisan way we did a few months ago to get a Ukrainian supplemental done. We also need bipartisan cooperation as soon as we can to pass another round of COVID health funding. I urge my Republican colleagues to work with us to pass COVID funding ASAP. It's very risky for the health of the American people for Republicans to play political games at a time when we need more health funding. Let's be clear. This is an exceedingly time-sensitive priority. According to the White House, countries like Japan and Vietnam and the Philippines are already ahead of the U.S. in placing orders for treatment, for medications, for vaccines. The U.S. is largely unable to follow suit, simply because Senate Republicans have blocked any new round of funding required to make these purchases. The longer Senate Republicans hold out on supporting new COVID funding, the greater the risk of other nations buying out all of the available supplies of vaccines and tests and life-saving therapeutics. And if they run out, it will take manufacturers months to make new doses. So again, to my Republican colleagues, work with us to pass COVID funding ASAP. Our country can't afford delays or political games that stand in the way. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.